Id light dream a reality.
Okay, are you ready to begin? Here you go. Some handouts for today's class. And now let's see what we have here in this discussion today. Okay guys, so right now you don't need to look at the papers, but there is one question often people ask, and that question is, does teaching grammar really work? So there might be one question you might often ask. Do we learn grammar in a way that somebody stands in front of you and teach it? Or in general sense, does teaching grammar really work? How come many students take a lot of grammar courses and classes, but they do not understand, they start to forget, or the better scenario, they learn, but they cannot actually use it in their second language? There might be another question. Okay. How many ways are there to learn grammar? And the other question is, am I learning in a correct way? Or am I maybe wasting all my time sitting in the class learning nothing? So the thing is, a lot of people here sitting in front of me have joined grammar classes to learn everything. They start from, for example, starting with, I don't know, maybe with parts of a speech. Then we move on to learning tenses. Then they move on to learn clauses, rules of writing, and etc. But the thing is, am I learning in a correct way? How many ways are there to teach something to students? So, here, if we think about it, learning a language, especially the structural ways, how a language is structured, can be divided into two ways. Instructors can teach you grammar, or in general sense, a language, in two ways. We call them implicit and explicit. So, there are generally two ways to teach someone a language. They're called implicit way, and the other one is explicit. And what do we actually do when we teach someone in an explicit way? An implicit, for instance, let's begin with the first one. An implicit way of learning a language is a way that the learner is neutral and passive. A very good way to learn a language, especially the grammatical structures, is to learn a language in an implicit way, in a way that you do not put so much effort in yourself to memorize and learn the grammatical structures. So, how do we actually do that? How can we make our participation in learning in a much less and then improve our understanding? So there might be two ways that can be very effective for you in terms of learning a language. The first one is modeling. You want to learn a language? Modeling is the best way. And how does it work? Let me give you an example. First, I have to tell you that modeling means exposure to language. If you are teaching somebody or if you are learning a language, I think that it is much better to do the modeling, which means to expose yourself to the language in an easy way. Let me give an example. So just imagine you're talking to somebody, a classmate, for example, and you constantly make grammatical mistakes. So that for today's class, let's talk about a child who wants to learn a language, right? So he would, for instance, make some mistakes in irregular verbs. So, as a tutor who's helping the child learn a language, you have to teach the language by using modeling. A child may say, oh, I bricked the block. Oh, I bricked my school project. So, you already understand that the child here has made a mistake. I bricked the block. I bricked my school project. So, instead of explicitly saying that, oh, no, you have made a mistake. And when you're talking about something happened in the past, you have to put into the verb or into the action, and you are, for example, you have to change, and there are some verbs that they're irregular. They cannot be changed into the past by adding ed or sound in the end. So it would be much better to teach the language by modeling. You might expose the language learner and emphasize on his mistakes this way. The child said, oh, I bricked the block. Oh, I bricked my school project. And as a person here, you can say, oh, you broke your block. You broke your school project. So here, the child, as you can see, is completely passive. Here, we're not forcing the child to learn the fact that some of the verbs are irregular, and we're not forcing the child to learn that when we're talking about something happened in the past, we have to use an ed after actions. So, constantly, by modeling the child or by applying modeling and exposing the child and emphasizing on the mistakes he or she is making, the child starts to learn the language. This usually happens when we start to learn our language from our parents. We have never been to, for example, grammar classes for our first language, have we? No, we've never been. We didn't take courses of Farsi or Pashto, for example, grammar. We have never taken these courses before. But the thing is, we learned our first language by modeling. Some of you might have children, right? Or some of you might have, for example, younger siblings at home. When they start to talk, you constantly see that they make a lot of mistakes, right? But you don't say that according to the rules of Pashto or Farsi language, you should say or you should change the action this way into the past. But we constantly correct mistakes by modeling. The child says something wrong, structurally, we corrected it right away. Is this clear for everybody so far? So now, we are learning a secondary language. And English is not a language that our parents spoke, and this is not a language that we have studied from parents, we have learned from parents. But the thing is, when we are learning a secondary language, I think that modeling can be a very good way to improve our language learning skills. So in this case, I recommend you to have your partner or to have a learner next to you. Start talking about different topics. And when somebody makes a mistake, right, the other person would instantly interfere and correct the mistake. And in this case, you don't necessarily need to provide explanations that why it is wrong and how grammatically I can correct it. So, easy and very passive. You don't need to do too much, but I think that you must have somebody like an instructor, a tutor, or a language learner partner that can help you in modeling. The other way that can help you learn a language is to provide expansion. Expansion is another type of exposure when language learners are asked to start to develop their thoughts. This usually happens especially for students of intermediate and upper intermediate levels. Suppose you're trying to speak about a topic, you're preparing for the TOEFL test, for the Duolingo, I don't know. The thing is, sometimes speakers, they put a lot of effort to express their ideas. So, if you do these practices together inside a group or a group discussion, that can help you a lot to provide and ask the speaker to provide expansion on his or her thoughts. What I mean by that is, I'm trying to explain that with a very simple example. Expansion means that if you are trying to speak, if you're trying to write, it would be much better if you provide, for example, more details and elaborations on what you're saying. So this way, you become more and more fluent in expressing your thoughts. Unfortunately, a lot of students try to show off, just using very advanced words in, for example, advanced contexts, but the problem is there. They use words, maybe correctly or in an incorrect way, but the thing is, he or she is not expanding ideas. That's the problem here. Let me give you an example. Somebody is trying to speak for 45 seconds on the TOEFL test. He might be very prepared for the first 10 seconds, using a lot of difficult words in his or her speech. The thing is, after that 10 seconds, the speaker stops for a moment. And that stop is because he or she is not able to expand the idea. And that comes from the fact that he or she, I'm talking about the learner, has not practiced expanding ideas. He has been learning vocabularies and grammatical structures just in order to use them, not conveying ideas. So here is a very contradictory point. I want to get a very high score on the test. I have to use very advanced vocabularies. Am I right? Yes, that's for sure. But the thing is, on the other hand, you are required to expand your ideas. If you just speak for 10 seconds out of 45 seconds using a lot of difficult words, but you're not able to expand your ideas by providing details and elaborations, that's not going to be acceptable. So you are, I think, going to speak only 10 out of 45 seconds. So in order to improve this point, I recommend you, if you want to produce the language in a spoken or in a written way, have a partner with yourself, right? And try to listen to each other and ask the speaker to expand upon ideas. Let me give an example for you. We often try to speak our ideas, and what the tests actually require you is to provide reasoning, provide logical reasons for your thoughts. Let me ask you a question first. Should college students work part-time jobs? Some of you might say yes, some of you might disagree with the question. There are a lot of advantages and disadvantages. This is a completely controversial topic. Yes, I think that college students work part-time jobs because they can become financially independent. They do not ask their parents for money anymore, am I right? They can gain valuable work experience. On the other side of the argument, some other people might disagree. Having a part-time job besides going to university, attending lectures, and etc. The problem is, they may get exhausted. They have to attend lectures, and they have to go to work, and they may not have enough time to do their assignments. So, well, as you can see, there are different opinions about this. But try to ask your partner, besides providing an idea, go on to expand your response by providing reasons. And here is the crucial point. Often in our language, guys, when we are trying to expand a topic, we often do it in our traditional way. We say a couple of reasons right next to each other, but we do not try to expand each reason. And that's the important thing. That's the problem in here. The problem is, if you ask me, I think yes, college students should work part-time jobs because of a couple of reasons, like they can be financially independent, they can gain valuable work experience, they can, I don't know, they can learn to, for example, you want to share? Yes, you can have mine. Yes. They can get into the society, they can prepare themselves for the future career, right? Am I right? How many reasons am I providing here? More than 5, I think, right? So the thing is, our speakers do not expand topics, and they think that, well, actually, this is enough. And now, listen to what I say again, and just look at the time. My speaking is not further than 10 seconds. I think a college student should work part-time jobs because they can become financially independent, they can gain experience, they can adjust into the society, they can prepare themselves for their future careers, right? How much time? Just exactly 10 seconds, right? But that is not what you have to do. You have to start with one reason, start explaining your reason. You know what I'm saying? One by one, point by point. So, think of this template. Every time you provide a reason, try to expand the topic. Try to expand the topic. Let's go this way. I think that a college student should work part-time jobs because they can become financially independent, right? In English language, now you have to expand the topic. How? That is the question you have to answer. How having a part-time job help a student to become financially independent? And now there is another controversy. Often students think that, oh, I have to expand the topic using very scientific, psychological, or social, for example, reasons for that, but that's not necessary if you're taking a test. All you have to do is to provide your personal point of view. You know what I'm saying? Just try to present your personal experience. Does anybody here have any personal experience of having a part-time job besides going to university, attending lectures? Yes? Can you tell us about your experience? And to be specific, financially. Have you become financially independent? How this happened? Speak it.
It's a good idea to work beside your college study because you're going to be financial independent.
That's right.
You don't depend on your family, and you can even support your family beside of your money or something like that.
Now, can you tell us a story of supporting yourself and supporting your family?
Yeah. For example, I'm going to university from 8 after 12 o'clock, then I came home and eat my lunch, then I go to...
I came home, yes?
Yeah.
You had your lunch.
Ate my lunch, then from 1 o'clock up to 6 o'clock, I go to a center and teach English.
I taught English.
I taught English, yeah. And beside of that, helped me a lot to be independent. And beside of independent, financially, I can improve my English.
You could.
Yeah.
All right. Take a look at this. Often modeling. I've been doing modeling. Did you notice that? Speakers, we often make mistakes. That's completely normal, all right? If you have a partner, all right, next to you, listening to what you're saying, please allow the partner to do the modeling. Culturally, we feel a little bit attacked if somebody starts to correct or rectify our mistakes. Am I right? But for a couple of minutes, let's put these cultural things aside. We are together in order to learn something, right? So just imagine I'm your speaking partner, right? Please allow me to apply modeling while you're speaking, all right? This usually does not happen in our country because when we start to rectify mistakes, the speaker often gets angry. And I think that's not a good reaction for now because we are here for a purpose, right? By doing modeling for a couple of times, if you start to talk about the things that happened to you, if you start to talk about, for example, your experiences, I'm pretty sure you start to learn that when the listener is rectifying my mistakes, and I often make simple past or verb tense mistakes, you start to learn the idea that you should stop doing this. Am I right? Instead of coming to a class, the professor or the teacher tells you that when you're talking about your personal experiences, often use past tenses, right? That takes us to another way of learning. Explicit. In an explicit way, which is often referred to as coached learning, you often have a tutor. You often have a teacher. You must have a teacher for explicit way of learning. And that is actually what is happening right now in your classes. You come to the class, you have a teacher, am I right? What does the teacher do? He's a coach, right? And he's trying to teach you something. And you're learning in an explicit way. So the thing is, in an explicit way, there is a coach teaching you something, and then what do you have to do? In an explicit way, a teacher or a tutor explicitly or directly expose you to, let's talk about grammar, structures of grammar, including definitions, including grammatical structures, and etc., right? And what do you have to do then? All you have to do is follow the rules, because that's a classroom, right? You have to learn the grammatical structure, and then you have to start putting everything together. Now, let's talk about a very big distinction between these two types of learning. As I told you first, an implicit way of learning a language, it happens at early ages. It happens especially when we start to learn our native language. Am I right? What languages do you guys speak? We either speak Farsi or Pashto, right? So that's the language we learn from parents. And that is the explicit. Have you ever been to a class for your native language? When you were, suppose you were 3, 4, 5? No, the class is the parents, right? And they often teach you in modeling. But there's no modeling in an explicit way. In modeling, it's a coached learning, and you have to be present at a certain time in a class and leave the class at a certain time, and there is a coach, there is a teacher and a tutor, right? And this is the way that we learn the language after we, for example, become an adult, right? The exact way you're learning right now. So, what I'm trying to tell you guys, in order to learn in a much better way, I advise you to put some elements of explicit learning in your language learning experience as well. So, try not to all the time read grammatical structures, memorize words, and then write essays and etc. for that. Try to get in groups of small talks, right? And then share ideas, rectify each other right at the moment, and emphasize on the mistakes. Try to expose yourselves to the language, right? And on the other hand, don't forget the topic of expansion. Expansion helps you learn a lot, because this is a very huge challenge. How? You have a lot of experience about having a part-time job, right? But you have never spoken that in English. So try to do that. Try to do that by having a partner. So just imagine yourself as a child, all right? And your partner as a parent or a sibling, right? Start to talk to him. He or she starts to rectify you, right? And listen to your expansion and ideas like a parent or like an elder sibling, right? And gives you instructions. So this way, you necessarily don't need to have a grammar book. You are learning at the moment. And you're actually very passive, which means that you're very comfortable learning that. But quite vice versa. When you're learning something inside a classroom in an explicit way, the level of activity goes up. And that level of activity actually helps you learn the language in an explicit or in a direct way. So, to sum up, you're learning a language, try to learn it in an implicit way, right? Which means in an indirect way. And explicitly, that is the classes that you're already joining, right? And you have a coach in front of you teaching you everything. So, in my point of view, if you're attending a class, you're learning the language in an explicit way, but what is not, and what people usually lack, is that they do not follow the language in an implicit way as well. So that is what makes language learning a little difficult. So guys, in order to make things a little bit more specific, I have printed everything here for you, and let's begin with some ways to improve our language learning experience. And yeah, you can have one. Guys, do you need papers? Yeah, There you go. So, one more topic I have to discuss here is that when you are learning a language, a lot of people are divided into different categories based on their learning abilities. So, here we go. Learning styles can be very different from person to person, especially in terms of absorbing, processing, comprehending, and retaining information. So, in general sense, if we talk about language learning, we are divided into three categories of visual learners, auditory learners, and tactile learners. So, what do I mean by this categorization of people? Everybody's sitting here right in front of me. You all have different abilities. And sometimes as a teacher, it is very difficult for me to cope with everyone's individual abilities. Sometimes I provide recommendations that it actually works very well for this guy, but not for that guy over there, right? Because they have different learning abilities. And in terms of learning abilities, we are all divided into three parts: visual learners, auditory learners, and tactile learners. But before that, let's talk about learning styles, as these three linguists define learning styles this way. First of all, Hartley in 1998, she states that learning styles are the ways in which individuals characteristically approach different learning tasks. So, what she is trying to say is that we have to make our approach to language learning specific, but based on our learning abilities. If you are a good listener, but not a good reader, then first, try to understand your abilities. Then make your approach specific and more in a listening way so that you can improve your language learning. A lot of the times, maybe if you compare a reader and a listener with each other, a lot of the time we can see that they often struggle learning a language because a listener is much better learning the language in, for example, using listening. On the other hand, when he starts to read, he or she starts to get frustrated. And this kind of creates a kind of disappointment in language learning. As we age, our abilities start to shrink. Am I right? So the point is, we have to make a specific schedule of learning based on our own ability. Let's move on to another definition from Sarasin in 1998, and he claims that learning style is the preference or predisposition of an individual to perceive and process information in a particular way or combination of ways. As you can see inside this definition, the emphasis is on a particular way or in a combination of ways. What I'm trying to tell you is our abilities create that particular way of learning a language. If you're not a good reader, stop reading. Start to listen. If you're a good listener, what I mean. Is that right? If you are not a good listener, but a very good reader, so learn the language in the form of reading. Omrod, 2008, he says that some students tend to learn better when information is presented through words because they are verbal learners. On the other hand, others seem to learn better when it is presented through picture, which we call them visual learners. So, let me tell you. Let me ask you a question. The thing is, when you are inside a classroom, you might be in a class in which a speaker, your tutor or your coach, starts talking and talking and talking without presenting anything on the monitor or without providing you with visual aids. So, in that case, sometimes you may feel that you're not learning anything. So, you should understand that there's no problem in your learning, but the problem is with the presentation of what you're trying to learn. Because you are a visual learner, not an auditory learner, you know what I'm saying? So do not get disappointed of that class. You can actually change your class or talk to the tutor to have more visual aids in front of you so that you can learn the materials in a much better way. You understand what I'm saying? Okay, I have seen a lot of people coming to classes, but then after a month or after a couple of days, they start to leave classrooms. The thing is that there is no problem with the students. The problem is with the with the coach, actually, right? So, as a teacher, we do have a responsibility to recognize your abilities, but it would be much better if you recognize yours first. You know what I'm saying? Okay, guys, so here are some recommendations I have typed for you for different types of learning styles. So, as you can see, learning style is divided into three categories of visual learners, auditory learners, and tactile learners. So, guys, after each definition, there are some recommendations I have written for you for each type of learner. So, technically speaking, if we divide all of us, we can be divided into three groups. So, first of all, recognize your learning abilities. And please follow these instructions. If you are, for example, an auditory learner, there are three instructions for you to learn a language in a much better way. If you are a tactile learner, there are three more instructions for you to learn a language in a much better way. But one thing I have to tell you in conclusion is that if you are a different type of learner or a specific kind of learner sitting in a class that is not beneficial for you, there is a very huge chance that the coach should change teaching methods for you. So that doesn't necessarily mean that you're not a good language learner. You know what I'm saying? And you stop learning the language. Anybody can learn any language, right? But the thing is that they should be exposed in the correct teaching method. Do you have any questions? So, guys, I think that I have to give you a homework for the next week, maybe if you come to attend my seminars for the next week. The thing is, I have given you some instructions for all of these different learning types, and I would like you to read what I presented to you in here, and take your time in reading them carefully, and try to see and compare these instructions to your personal experiences. If you have had any questions, you can actually ask me, or you can write your question down, and I would be very glad to respond to your questions. Do you have any questions for now? Yes?
When we learn how to learn a language,
Mm-hmm.
is it compared to
Specifically, the TOEFL test, the Duolingo, the other tests, they are designed to examine your language learning abilities. How much language you already have, or how much language you already do know, right? Let me put it this way. Everybody sitting here in this class, no matter level 1, level 2, TOEFL prep students, guys, right? Or students that they have already passed the TOEFL test, everybody sitting here has got a certain level of language abilities, right? And when we're talking about tests, like the TOEFL test, those tests are just trying to understand your level of understanding and the usage of the language. As you can see, these tests are divided into 4 skills, right? 2 of which are receptive skills, like reading and listening. 2 of the rest are productive skills, being able to speak, being able to write. So, if all of you take the TOEFL test right now, so you can see that the results could be very different, right? Based on something called meta-language. A meta-language is your ability of understanding the language and producing the language as much as you can. So, learning styles, of course, can help you improve your language learning, right? But then, again, after that, when you have improved your language enough, then I recommend you to prepare yourself specifically for the TOEFL or IELTS or any other tests. And when you join these classes, they do not teach you how to learn a language, but they orient students to take a test. So, do not expect a TOEFL class to teach you language, but to instruct you how to take the test with the language abilities that you already acquired. Is that right? You're welcome. So, any other questions for today? Yes, please.
Sure, I have a question for you that I have two questions for you. First of all, how we can memorize a word? Besides of memorizing the words, how we can use it practically in our practical skill, for example, speaking and writing. And my second question for you, teacher, give me some information about your background knowledge.
Thank you. Talking about words. Words often make us very confused. We are people who speak Farsi and Pashto, right? We have a completely different culture and a language than the people in the United States, than people in Great Britain, right? So, the very first confusion that students often face when learning vocabularies is that they often make equivalents. What I'm trying to say is that you start to learn a word in English, and then you quickly try to understand what it means in Farsi or in Pashto. Am I right? And then there are dictionaries that they tell you that if this is the English word, these are the Farsi or Pashto meanings. It doesn't make sense because I have asked you to just one word, but you're giving me a list of meanings. So the very first thing is that we have to overcome this confusion by the fact that two languages cannot have equivalents. And what I mean by that is that if you're trying to search a word in Farsi or in Pashto, they're not equal to each other. Because, as I told you, we have different culture, we have different usages of the words, and they do have different usages of the word themselves too. So this fact makes the conclusion that we do not have equivalents. So what do I have to do? Stop finding equivalents. Because there are no equivalents. And the other thing is, the other recommendation for your question, in order to learn words better, is to learn it in an implicit way, which we call this visualize words. And what I mean by visualization is that when you have a word in English, read the definition in English and see what the definition says. Then close your eyes, or maybe not, think about the definition which is provided from the dictionary. And of course, it should be an English-to-English dictionary, right? Not equivalent in Dari or in Pashto. Try to think what the definition presents, right? And then, when you get the definition, try to produce the word according to the given definition. So this way, you can learn the language in a much more practical way. And something that stops the production is translation. If you learn the word in Farsi or in Pashto, then you have to spend a lot of time translating your sentence from Farsi or Pashto into English, which makes it a little bit more difficult. But if you visualize the word and see how I can use that, then it would be much easier for you. Let me give an example for you. Imagine that you learn a word, like the word pride. If we try to say what it means in Farsi, what do we translate it to? Yes, iftikhar. Iftikhar can have different contextual uses in Farsi. Sometimes these uses cannot match with the English. So, if we think about pride, and if you want to learn it in an effective way, think of it. Have you ever felt this in your life? Yes. I remember the time when I graduated from school, took the Conquer examinations, and I could get into university. That was the moment that I felt this. So I'm trying to visualize the word instead of making it into Farsi and then Farsi into English. As you can see, there is an extra step. Am I right on this? Okay. So no further questions because I'm in a hurry and I have to leave the area as soon as possible. Please read the papers, and if you have any questions, I hope that I can attend another presentation for you next week as well. Have a good day and see you next week.
Id you like dream a reality?